Okay, here we go. Last notes of the year. Um, Today we're going to focus on specifically the Supreme Court. Yesterday we did some judicial branch stuff and we mentioned the Supreme Court, but today it's just Supreme Court stuff. Okay, and like I mentioned yesterday, this stuff is so important. I can't tell you how important the Supreme Court is, um, because like I said earlier, there's these people make decisions that affect every single one of us. They decide what's legal, what's not legal, um, and you should be concerned on both sides as to who is being put on the Supreme Court. This lady right here is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is really old. She's in her 80s. Um, she is a Democrat. Right now, there are four Democrats and five Republicans. So, of course, Republicans are going to say Republican laws are legal, and Democrats are going to disagree with that. If someone passes away on the Republican side and replaces a liberal, then there will be more liberal laws. So, you should be concerned with this. And she is very old. If she were to pass away, sadly, then she would be replaced right now with a Republican. If a Democrat takes over, she will probably retire because she's very old and she will want to be replaced by a Democrat. So if Joe Biden wins, Joe Biden would replace her with a Democrat. Um, right now, Donald Trump has picked two Supreme Court justices during his 4 years in office. You are going to live over half of your life probably with those two Supreme Court justices deciding what is legal and not legal. Brett Kavanaugh was just recently chosen, and he's a younger guy, probably 50-ish. If he stays in office for 30 something years, I mean, you guys are going to be almost 50 by the time he steps down. So he is going to be determining what laws are legal for you for the next 30 years. So it's kind of a big deal. So let's run through the basics, the constitutional stuff, and how they get picked and whatnot. Starting off, there are nine Supreme Court justices. They're called justices of the Supreme Court, okay? And they get life terms. There's no 4 year terms or 2 year terms or 6 year terms. They get life terms. And I would ask the class why, but I'll just tell you why. The reason is because they want to take the politics out of it. They don't want these people to have their decisions swayed by by a boss or by elections. I mean, you guys know politicians say whatever they can to get reelected, but we don't want these people to have to worry about getting reelected and have to change their opinions with popular opinions. We want them to be above all of that and do what they think is right, and they can't do that if they have to appease a boss. I mean, you know how Donald Trump is. He fires somebody every other week. If they made a decision he didn't like, they would fire he would fire them. So they'd have to do what he wants. Well, that's not what this is set up to be. This is supposed to be an impartial, well, not impartial, but it's supposed to be a group of people that do the right thing or what they think is right, not just appeasing the public or appeasing Congress or appeasing the president. Um, there we go. So they won't feel pressured to rule a certain way. That's the simple terms. Here's Clarence Thomas. He's a Supreme Court justice. As far as requirements go, how old should you be a Supreme Court justice? Now, I always bring this up and say you have to be 25 to be a representative, 30 to be a senator, 35 to be president. So how old do you have to be this? Everyone says, oh, 40. Nope. If you remember, there are no criteria in the Constitution to be a Supreme Court justice. They could make me a Supreme. The president could nominate me as a Supreme Court justice. If you're 18, I don't even know if you had to be 18. The president could nominate you as a Supreme Court justice. So go ahead and tweet to him and make your case be known. Um, no age requirements, no experience requirements, but to be a Supreme Court justice, well, we'll get to that in just a second. First off, you have to be chosen by the president. This is Neil Gorsuch. He was chosen by Trump, and we'll talk about his controversial choosing in a minute. He's not a controversial person, to my knowledge, but his choosing was pretty controversial. So the president nominates them just like any other judge, U.S. judge. He just picks the person. When there's an opening, he picks the person. Then you get interviewed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, which we've talked about earlier. I mentioned Jeff Flake yesterday, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And these aren't usually a big deal, but I mean, the Brett Kavanaugh ones, if you remember, Brett Kavanaugh was accused of sexual assault by Dr. Ford, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and they had these hearings. The Senate Judiciary Committee had these hearings where she testified and gave her account of being sexually assaulted by him and his friend when they were in college or high school, I don't remember. And then he came in and defended himself, and I mean, he was yelling and he was really mad, and it was kind of a dramatic scene. Um, So once you get through that, the Senate Judiciary Committee confirms it and they say, yep, we're okay with this. Let's send it to the Senate. And the Senate gets to vote. Technically, I don't think they have to be uh, confirmed by the committee, but I think it's always happened. Um, so then it goes to the Senate and they vote to whether they want to approve this person or not. Well, Brett Kavanaugh, of course, is a Republican. Trump picked him, so he's a Republican. The Senate is controlled by Republicans. So, again, another reason why you should care, because this group is so important, and the people who confirm them are the Senate. So you should care about other Senate races. Like right this year, Indiana does not have a senator up for re-election. We have two Republican senators. Todd Young was elected 4 years ago, and Mike Brown was elected 2 years ago. This year we don't have one up. But you should be interested in other states because it's really close. And if you're a Democrat, you should want Republicans to lose so you can take control of the Senate. If you're a Republican, you should be rooting for Republicans to stay in control of the Senate so they can keep appointing these people, because it's a big deal. And I'll tell you why right now. The Senate votes, and they have to have 51 votes. They have to have a majority, right? But here's the thing. This is Merrick Garland. What happened in, I don't remember which year it was. It was late in Obama's presidency, so probably 2008. Barack Obama, his name was Anthony Scalia. He was a Supreme Court justice. He was a Republican, and he died unexpectedly. I don't know if he had a heart attack or what. He was an older guy, but he was a Republican. The Republicans had 5, and the Democrats had 4. So there was a Republican majority, right, in the Supreme Court. Anthony Scalia died, so that left it at 4 Republicans to 4 Democrats. Well, Obama's the president, so he gets to nominate the next Supreme Court justice, and he chooses Merrick Garland, who is a Democrat, and that would have given 5 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Well, when he nominated Mitch McConnell, who was in charge of the Republican Senate, kind of laughed and said, "That's really cute that you think you're going to get to nominate the next person." He said, "We're not even going to vote," is what Mitch McConnell said. "We're not even going to have a vote," is what he said. He said, "The next president will get to pick this. You don't get to pick this person," which seems kind of unconstitutional. But he said, "No, we're not even going to vote, because whoever you pick, we're not going to let you pick the next Supreme Court justice." He said, "We'll let the next president pick." And of course, he was hoping Trump would win, so Trump would pick a Republican. If Hillary Clinton had won, who knows how she would have picked a new Supreme Court justice. I don't know if McConnell would have let her have anybody. But I mean, this is again why it's so important. If Joe Biden is to take over and beat Donald Trump, he would get to pick a Supreme Court justice should an opening occur. So let's say Ruth Bader Ginsburg steps down because she's so old, and Joe Biden picks somebody. Will the Senate let him even pick somebody? So it's really important for Democrats to win the Senate if they want to pick a liberal justice for the Supreme Court. Okay. They can be removed from office. Like I said, the president can't fire them, Congress can't fire them, but there is, well, I guess they can kind of be fired. They can be impeached, just like the president, exactly the same way. The House can find charges against them and say, you know what, they did this bad, awful thing. Then it goes to the Senate, and the Senate vote, just like we had the impeachment this year of Trump. That's exactly what they do. It's happened one time to this guy named Samuel Chase. I'm pretty sure it was a political thing. It was a long time ago, but it's happened one time. As far as the Supreme Court works, cases have to start in the lower courts. They don't hear cases that have original jurisdiction. They only have original jurisdiction in like foreign affairs and stuff like that, but we don't hear that too often. So what happens is you lose in a lower case, a lower U.S. court or state court or whatever, and then you appeal. Once you keep losing and keep appealing, it gets to the Supreme Court. Then the justices have to meet. All 9 of them have to meet and decide which one they want to hear, because they're not going to hear everything. They might say, you know what, we don't need to hear this. We're going to go with the original ruling. You have to go with what that judge said. It's called the Rule of 4. You have to have 4 Supreme Court justices agree to hear the case in order for it to go to the Supreme Court. And this is why it's and that's a cool rule, because otherwise you just have majority rules. Like right now we have 4 Democrats and 5 Republicans. If there was a case that came up that Republicans didn't really want to pass, they could just say, nope, we're not even going to hear it, if it was a majority rules thing. But there are 4 Democrats, so they do have to at least hear the case right now, and then they can decide to rule against it if they want. And again, this is kind of a big deal because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I keep bringing up, she's really old. If Donald Trump wins and has another 4 years, is a chance that she could pass away during his presidency. He would pick another Republican. The Republican Senate would confirm it, and then it would be 6-3, and then that Republican majority could vote to not even hear cases anymore. So it's kind of a big deal. Then you have your court, just like a case and like anything else. The two sides argue their case, and the court makes a decision. Here's an interesting point to the Supreme Court. And I think we've talked about this throughout the year: is they can't enforce their decision. They can make a decision, but there's no executing it. That's the executive branch's part here. And we brought this up several times that the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, Georgia wanted the Cherokees' land, and the Cherokees said no and took it to court. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Cherokee Nation won. The Supreme Court said no, you can't take their land. To which Andrew Jackson said, "Watch me," and he kicked them off anyway because I think his quote was something along the lines of, "The Supreme Court has made its decision. Now let's see them enforce it." Which he said, "You know what? They made their decision, but they don't have any power. Watch me kick them off their land." So that's a weakness of the Supreme Court. They're definitely of the three the weakest branch, just because they can make decisions, but they can't enforce them. Um, I would typically have you guys do an assignment where you have to research all of the Supreme Court justices, um, which I still might actually. So I'll stop there. So yeah, I'm going to put this on an Ed Puzzle again, which you already know that because you're watching the Ed Puzzle now. So that's it for today.